Today, we're going to dive deep into one of the most intriguing what-if scenarios of world history. What if China had discovered America before Christopher Columbus? How would the world look today? How would history, culture, trade, and even global power have shifted? Let's expand this alternate timeline even further and imagine it together in more vivid detail. To start, let's revisit the real context. In the early 15th century, under the Ming Dynasty, China stood as the world's richest and most technologically advanced civilization. The great cities of Nanjing and Beijing hummed with scholars, merchants, craftsmen, and emperors who commanded vast armies and the greatest fleet on earth. The Chinese had perfected shipbuilding. Their giant treasure junks, commanded by Admiral Zheng He, dwarfed any European ship of the time. His fleet included massive 9-masted ships capable of carrying hundreds of sailors and cargo from silks to spices, porcelain to gold. Zheng He's expeditions reached as far as East Africa. Had they kept sailing, the mighty Pacific lay open ahead. The winds and currents were known. The Chinese already understood the monsoon patterns and trade winds. If only the political will had lasted a little longer. If only the court eunuchs who supported maritime trade had won their battles against conservative Confucian officials, those giant ships might have pushed beyond the Indian Ocean. They might have slipped across the Pacific, centuries before anyone in Europe dreamed of crossing the Atlantic. So let's imagine it really happened. Imagine that after reaching the Swahili coast, Zheng He returned to the emperor with tales of unimaginable riches and untapped lands across the Great Water. Enthralled, the Ming court funds an even grander voyage, bigger fleets, better maps, bolder ambitions. The next generation of Chinese sailors, learning from Zheng He's logs and experiments, build sturdier hulls, improved compasses, more precise star charts. The Pacific no longer feels like an endless void. It becomes an open sea lane, waiting to be bridged. Their first landfall could have been somewhere along the California coastline, perhaps near what we now call San Francisco Bay, a vast natural harbour, perfect for anchorage. Chinese sailors step ashore and find towering redwoods, rolling hills, rivers teeming with fish, and indigenous peoples whose languages and customs are entirely new to them. Imagine the first encounter. A fleet of giant treasure junks anchors off the misty Pacific coast. The local tribes, curious and cautious, approach in canoes carved from cedar trees. The Chinese lower small landing boats, bringing gifts of silk banners, porcelain bowls, shiny mirrors, marvels the locals have never seen. The first exchange is wary but peaceful. No gun. Unlike the European conquistadors, the Chinese worldview, shaped by Confucian ethics and centuries of tribute diplomacy, sees these people not as subjects to enslave, but as potential tributaries. Tribute missions, gifts exchanged, envoys appointed. The local chieftains receive bronze mirrors and metal tools in return for pelts, shells, and stories of the land's inland. Slowly, the Chinese explorers push south and north. They sail down the coast to what is now Mexico. There they encounter larger, organized societies, the Toltecs fading, the Aztecs rising. The Aztec rulers, fierce warriors but pragmatic diplomats, recognize the value in these strangers' goods. They trade obsidian and gold for Chinese textiles, metalwork, and, eventually, gunpowder weapons. Small Chinese outposts appear along the coast, wooden forts, watchtowers, stone storehouses with tiled roofs. The Chinese introduce irrigation techniques, paper making, and new crops brought from Asia, such as rice. What does this mean for the Americas? The native peoples gain access to iron tools centuries before Columbus. Instead of stone blades and wooden clubs, they forge iron spears and plow blades. They learn Chinese agricultural practices, terraced farming, new irrigation canals. Maize and potatoes still flourish, but now combined with Asian crops like soybeans and rice paddies. The Aztec Empire, armed with rudimentary muskets and cannons purchased through tribute, becomes a regional powerhouse even stronger than before. Over decades, these coastal Chinese settlements grow. Small communities of traders, soldiers, and craftsmen intermarry with local tribes. Mixed families form new bilingual societies. Children learn to read Chinese characters alongside native pictographs. Chinese temples rise alongside native pyramids. Buddhist monks chant sutras while Aztec priests observe ancient rites. A hybrid faith develops. A fusion of ancestor worship, Confucian ideals, and native deities. Meanwhile, back in China, news of these far-off lands spreads. Tales of gold, fertile lands, and new alliances reach the imperial court. Encouraged, the Ming Dynasty invests more in shipbuilding and navigation schools. Young nobles clamor for titles in the Eastern Sea Commanderies, provinces carved along the American coastline. The Pacific becomes a Chinese lake, ringed with outposts from Japan to California to Peru. So what happens when Europe finally stirs? Imagine Columbus sails west in 1492, dreaming of India. But instead of empty islands, he finds bustling Chinese outposts. A fragile truce forms, an uneasy balance of power where Europe must trade carefully with the established Chinese presence or risk humiliating defeat. The ripple effects are enormous. Without easy conquests of gold-rich civilizations, Spain's empire is smaller and weaker. The Atlantic slave trade never balloons to feed massive plantations, because no vast Spanish and Portuguese colonies dominate the Caribbean and South America. Instead, a system of tribute and small Chinese colonies grows. Africa avoids centuries of mass human trafficking on the same scale. Millions remain in their homelands instead of being shipped across the Atlantic in chains. How about technology? Imagine Native American scholars traveling to Nanjing or Beijing, studying Confucian classics, learning paper-making, gunpowder, advanced mathematics, and printing. Back home, they become innovators. Indigenous printing presses produce codices blending Chinese calligraphy and native glyphs. Early newspapers circulate among the Aztec elite, recording trade prices, seasonal festivals, and imperial decrees. Imagine the architecture. Along the Pacific coast, cities blossom with a strange beauty, pagoda rooftops mingling with adobe walls, ceremonial plazas lined with dragon motifs carved by local artisans. Bamboo gardens flourish beside maize fields. Chinese carpenters teach locals how to build multi-story wooden houses resistant to earthquakes. Trade flows east and west. Chinese merchants sail across the Pacific, loading holds with gold, silver, cocoa, vanilla, and maize, commodities unknown in Asia before. In return, they bring rice, silk, jade carvings, and fine porcelain to the Americas. The Pacific Rim becomes a vast circular network. The Spanish and Portuguese watch enviously from across the Atlantic, a new world order beyond their grasp. How would religion evolve? Buddhism spreads along the west coast, not through conquest but through quiet missionaries. Native spiritual leaders find harmony with Buddhist ideas of balance and rebirth. Confucian teachings about family loyalty and respect for elders resonate with native clan traditions. Instead of forced Catholic conversions, a new syncretic faith blossoms. Temples blend local iconography with Chinese guardian lions and lotus carvings. China itself transforms too. The constant flow of gold and silver enriches the Ming court, funding further innovations. China never retreats into isolation. It continues to push technological frontiers, perhaps achieving industrial breakthroughs centuries earlier than in our timeline. Gunpowder weapons evolve faster, shipbuilding advances, steam power appears sooner. Now picture the 18th and 19th centuries. Instead of European powers carving up Asia, the Ming Dynasty's navy guards coasts from India to California. The Opium Wars never happen, Europe's leverage is weaker. Britain, France, and the Dutch are forced to negotiate fair trade deals instead of imposing unequal treaties. The balance of global power tilts toward the east. By the 20th century, this alternate America looks dramatically different. Major cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, or Vancouver are bustling metropolises where Mandarin is spoken alongside native languages. Festivals combine Chinese New Year dragons with local dances and masks. Food culture fuses dumplings with maize tortillas, tea ceremonies with native cocoa drinks. Politics would be unrecognizable too. Perhaps no United States ever emerges in the same way. Instead, the Pacific coast becomes a string of semi-autonomous provinces under distant Chinese suzerainty. Inland empires like the Aztecs or Incas modernize, field armies with rifles and cannons, and negotiate with both China and Europe on equal footing. The struggle for independence from China, if it comes, might mirror the slow unraveling of other colonial empires, but in a hybrid world, not purely European. What about the environment? Without massive European-style plantations, North America's forests and prairies might remain more intact for centuries. Bison herds still thunder across the plains, coastal fisheries thrive. The blending of agricultural knowledge allows more sustainable farming practices, terracing, mixed crops, and irrigation inspired by Chinese and native systems. Imagine the modern world. Global trade routes crisscross the Pacific as the main artery of commerce. Shanghai, Nanjing, and coastal California ports rival each other as world financial hubs. English is a global language, but so is Mandarin, and so are native tongues preserved and enriched by centuries of respect and exchange. Fashion, philosophy, cuisine, all shaped by a continuous blending of Eastern and indigenous influences. So what does this massive what-if teach us? It shows that small choices, the burning of treasure ships, a single emperor's fear of nomads, can shift the course of centuries. It reminds us that history is not fixed. It's a web of possibilities, chance, and human decision. If China had stayed outward-looking, the age of exploration might have worn Chinese silk instead of Spanish armor. Before we end, here's a question for you. Keep questioning and keep exploring the roads not taken. See you soon!